Hello there. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and it's been a long time since I've done one of these, and it's really exciting and fun to be back here recording an episode here. And this is yet another impromptu episode, as you all know, or maybe you don't. If you're new, you don't know, but if you've been around for a while, you know very well that at one point this podcast was like every single day, 5 days a week without fail. That was for like 400 some odd episodes or something like that, maybe 500 some odd episodes. So, there used to be a very regular and even rigid cadence to these episodes. But in the last year or so, I've switched. Well, actually, I took an entire year off of making any episodes, any content at all. And when I came back, it was coming back into more of a fluid and adaptable sort of posture with these. So they really are. There's no certain cadence to them at all. The episodes, when I record them, when they appear, and from the feedback I've gotten, it seems like you all are liking this. So. And I know personally, I'm really enjoying this sort of, doing the podcast when I'm inspired to do the podcast. It feels much more beautiful in a way. So anyway, but that doesn't mean that what we did before wasn't beautiful too, right? And that's actually at the heart of what I want to talk about today. And that's one thing that this this podcast has always had, is these great segues, completely unintentional. But anyway, so it's really easy for us to look back on our lives and on the decisions we've made and on the actions we've taken or the actions we haven't taken, right? And it's easy to look back. And when I say look back, we start with now, right? We start with saying, like, where is my life right now? And where could it have been? Or where should it have been? Or what would have, what could have, what should have happened if I had done this differently, that differently, this differently, that differently, And this becomes a habit to look back this way. And again, there's nothing wrong with necessarily doing that. And we'll get back to that in a second. The pros and cons of or the way in which this can be done in a very positive way, right? But as with anything, right, when we do something over and over and over, it becomes habitual, right? And so the question is not whether we are looking back at our decisions, because we all have decisions that we would love to make over, right? We all have regret. We all have, none of us have lived a life that we would consider perfect, right? And in fact, and this is really the point I'm trying to make, is that we are our own most harsh judges, right? Like, we judge ourselves more harshly than we judge anyone else, right? And we judge ourselves more harshly than we probably believe people are judging us just as harshly as we judge ourselves, but that's usually not the case either, right? And so the thing is, though, that when we start to look back on our lives and we start to think like, oh gosh, I should have done this differently, I should have done that differently, and I'm so X, Y, or Z, right? I'm so dumb, or I was such a fool, or I was such a horrible person, depending on where that language takes us, right? That language is the thing that becomes habitual just as much as the action of looking back on our lives becomes habitual. Okay. And so now two really important things are happening when we do this, right? And again, as it becomes a habit, it becomes the norm. It becomes the way we're always active in our mind, right? And so two things that are happening here, right? Number one is that we're practicing this language, right? We're practicing the way that we're talking to ourselves. And if we're constantly saying, like, I can't believe how stupid I was, I can't believe, all these mistakes I've made, I can't believe all the terrible things I've done in my life, we start to form this opinion of ourselves, this vision of ourselves, which is really very, very pessimistic, very, self-critical, very even self-loathing. And again, the more we do it, the more we're practicing it. And the more we practice it, the more it becomes, the old saying is, the quite frankly, the incorrect saying is practice makes perfect. That's not true, but practice makes permanent, right? And so the more we do this, the more we're talking to ourselves in such a, sometimes mean kind of voice, that's the voice that we start to know ourselves by. And then the other thing that happens, and I think this one is maybe a little bit more, obvious and sort of, nuts and bolts kind of foundational, right? Is that the more time we're spending thinking about what has happened in our lives, or for that matter, worrying about what might be happening in the future, right? What we're not doing is we're not living now. And that's the thing, right? Life is happening now. That's the whole point of this podcast, is we show up to life in the now, in the here, right now. Now, again, it's very helpful and important in some ways to have a sort of autobiographical examination, right? So it's not, it would be a terrible mistake, I believe, to say, oh, we should never, ever think of the past. Right? Because the past happened, and it's important to examine the past so that we can learn from the past. Right? But now again, in that same way that the tone of the way we look at ourselves in the past, we also have to recognize that we have a natural sort of negativity bias. So we're more likely to see the things that we're not proud of. We're more likely to see the things that we're, that were problematic, rather than the things that we are proud of, that were really beautiful about our past, right? But anyway, getting back to the idea is that we got to find a balance, right? Because it is very, very helpful to look back and to see, but to do so with a sense of kindness and with a sense of care and love for ourselves. And if we can do that, then the past becomes an informer of the future, right? It becomes something that helps us to understand our present experience, not the future, the present. It helps us to understand the present. It informs the present moment experience if we're looking at it from that place of, kindness and love and care. And really what that translates into is curiosity. Like, why is it that I made the decisions I made? What was going on in my life at that time? Because whatever was happening then is not necessarily what's happening right now. Oftentimes it's vastly different. If I look back at the person I was when I was in my 20s, for instance, all the things I was involved with, all the ways that I spent my days, just very basically, the job I had, the people I was around, the activities, the hobbies, all the, the maladaptive coping mechanisms, which were a big thing for me. When I look back and I see all those things, I recognize that, wait a second, the person who was making the decisions that I'm now regretting was not the person I am right now. And so right now, I am looking back at this other version of me, right? And if I see it with that sort of separation, with that sort of disidentification, then I can forgive that guy back then. I can say, oh man, oh man, that decision you made, that was bad. That was tough. That was really on the wrong side of things. But I forgive you and I love you because you were 22 years old and you did not know any better. And if you had all the wisdom that I have now, you would have made a different decision. And so I can learn about, again, why did I make that decision? What drove it? What was, and can I see any parallels? Can I see any ways in which that hasn't changed about me? And maybe that is where some of the work needs to be done. Maybe I need to look at something like that and say, wow, I still have this tendency for X, Y, or Z, even as I did when I was in my 20s, but yet I've grown so much, I've changed so much. So maybe this is something that I can examine further. And again, the only way we get to change any of this is if we do that examination with a sense of love and a sense of caring for ourselves, which promotes forgiveness and curiosity, inquisitiveness, not categorization, not judgment, not scolding. And my friends, nothing could be more important than this. It really couldn't. Because then we allow ourselves also, if we're not looking at ourselves from the standpoint of blame and reparations of some kind, right? Then we can then let it go. And then we can dwell in the present moment. We can dwell in the now with whatever it is that we're doing. Because remember, right, and this is the most important thing, and this is the absolute theme of this podcast from the first episode right until now, is that when we're doing this examination, and this is another important point I'll get to in just a second, but when we're doing this examination, what else is going on right now? Are we in the office as we're having these thoughts? Are we driving our car down the road when we're having these thoughts? Are we walking up to the house where we're about to open the door and meet our family after being gone for the day for work? Are we watching a movie? Are we having a conversation with someone? Because the thing is that the more we get lost in that past, we're not really here for the future, for the present. We're not here for our experience right now. We are not showing up to our life. Because as much as we like to think, like we look back and we say, oh, that's my life, right? That all those decisions, all those years, the high school, the college, the girlfriends, the jobs, the cars, the sports, all that stuff, that's my life. I can look at it. There it is. But no, your life is right here, right now. And it always has been. Every one of those things that you're examining, when they happened, they were happening right now. And so this is where we come into a profound opportunity to recognize that, wait a minute, I am not present right now. I am not here with my experience, with my children, with my loved ones, with my interests, my hobbies, my passions. I'm not here with it. I'm somewhere else. And so that leads me to, how can we look at this as a practice, right? Now, one of the most beneficial practices around this whole topic is journaling, right? You can, pardon me, take a little sip of tea here in the present moment. We can, journal for 5 or 10 minutes every morning, at which time we examine this past, right? But when we're doing it as a journaling practice, it's very important to recognize that the journaling practice is a present moment experience. It's something we're doing right here, right now. So I'm not just lost in these thoughts and lost in the turmoil of all the mistakes I've made and all the regrets I have and all the, even if I'm looking at stuff that I'm happy about from the past, right? I'm still getting lost in it. And again, if at that moment I'm about to see my kids, then there's a dissonance there. There's a conflict that's happening. And that conflict is going to, 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10 even, is going to cause some stress to happen. And then that stress makes the thoughts, makes the memories that much harsher. Oh, yeah, you remember that, but what about that thing you did? It's like, oh my gosh, now I feel even worse about myself. And now I'm even further away from my family or my friends or my hockey game or my, Scrabble or trivia night or whatever it is that I'm doing. Now, usually what happens is these things creep in when we're in quiet time. So it's not during trivia night. It's not during a bowling game, but it's in the car on the way to the bowling game, right? Or it's on the car on the way home from the bowling game. And that's when it starts to, sort of creep in, right? And so again, by creating a journaling practice, what you're doing is you're giving your life, but externally, but also internally, your mind has a structure now, right? And that structure will, your mind and your physiological brain and nervous system will adapt to this very, very quickly. I mean, after just a week or two, you're going to get into this habit where it will feel uncomfortable somehow to be thinking about all this stuff when you're not journaling. So that journaling becomes the time where you examine this, which then allows you to let go of it when it pops up throughout the day. And you say, oh, no, this isn't the time. This is for my journaling practice. I'm here. I'm back here with whatever it is I'm doing. Because remember, I mean, this is worth saying 1,000,000 times, right? That life happens now. Life doesn't happen 20 years ago. Life doesn't happen yesterday morning. Life happens now. And so right now, what are you doing? Not just physically, not just externally, although that matters too, but what is it that's going on internally? Now, as we always say, and I'll give you a little refresher on the mindfulness practices, right? That with every moment of our lives, we're having an experience that exists in three specific realms. We have a physical experience. I'm sitting here driving my car. My body is in my car. My body is feeling whatever it's feeling. Maybe it's hungry. Maybe it's satiated. Maybe it's tired. Maybe it's energized, over-caffeinated, whatever's going on. That's my physical body. My body is also breathing. My heart's beating. My eyes are blinking. My salivary glands are creating saliva, right? The whole thing is happening as I'm driving my car. This is my body experience, okay? I'm also having an experience of an emotional experience, right? I'm also experiencing an emotional response to every moment of my experience. Now, sometimes it's neutral. There's no traffic. I'm not late. I'm on my way somewhere. It's just a mundane errand or something like that. There's no real emotions here, right? Or it just feels neutral emotions, right? It's not happy. It's not sad. It's not hopeful. It's not dreadful. It's just is what it is, right? It's just sort of neutral. It's just bland, vanilla, if you will. Now, I'm also, the third realm of my experience is the experience of my thoughts. This is where things get interesting, right? Because I'm driving my car and I'm not feeling any emotions right at this moment, right? But I don't have to think about driving my car, right? I'm just driving my car the same way I've driven it a million times, and, blinker left, blinker right, and just, kind of, follow the signs and stay in the lanes. And I'm doing it, and I don't have to think about it. So the question is, what am I thinking about? And that's when, usually in that moment, is when one of these things is going to pop up, right? Now, again, it's habitual, right? So if you are the kind of person who always has a tendency to look back, which many of us do, right? To look back and say, oh man, what poor decisions I made. What a horrible person I've been my whole life, right? Well, then every time you do have some idle time, that's most likely what's going to occur, right? Doesn't have to. You're not bound to think about that right now, but that's what pops into your mind. Now, again, because we have a natural negativity bias, we're always on the lookout for what's wrong. How bad can things get? How scary are things? How dangerous is this right now? Okay? And so the sort of habitual, popping up of the thought together with that negativity bias is most likely going to create what we would call a negative thought, right? Which is to say that we look back on a decision we made and we don't look in a place of neutrality and curiosity. We look at a place in, oh my gosh, what a dummy I was. How horrible that was. What a bad person I was. Or what a bad decision that was. Okay? So now it's negative. Now, as soon as we have that negative thought, we're going to have an emotional response to that thought. And because the thought is negative, the emotion is going to become negative. It's going to be an emotion of resentment, of self-loathing, of pessimism, catastrophe. Okay? And now the emotions are going to follow that. The emotions are going to be on the negative side of the emotional scale, right? So we're going to feel, again, the pessimism, the just the dread or whatever that negative emotion is going to be. And now we're going to feel that in our body. Right? At that point, there's going to be some tension, maybe even some stress hormones flying through because we're feeling so worried and we're feeling so, catastrophic about things, right? And now we're gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. Our palms are getting a little sweatier, right? And now all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, we're in this bad mood. Now, of course, I'm giving you a kind of silly sort of example of this, but it's not that far from the truth of what happens. Because again, now remember, let's keep going with our little scenario here, right? So we're driving down. Now all of a sudden we're feeling this not so comfortable feeling in our body, and we're feeling these negative emotions, and we're having these, really negative thoughts. And now we pull into this supermarket and we park the car and we get out. And what do you think? Do you think the thoughts just disappear like that? Of course they don't. Of course they don't. They keep running in the background. And we're sitting there looking at apples and thinking about the job that we had when we were 25, and how, what a terrible decision we made. And then we're in the bread aisle and we're thinking, oh my gosh, every decision I've ever made is horrible. What kind of person am I? Why is my life so terrible? And then probably we're going to grab a big tub of ice cream and say, oh, screw it. I'm just going to, pick out tonight because I feel so terrible. I hope you're all laughing with me, because that's really what it is, right? So when we find ourselves in that place of and if you are one of the people who find yourself in this place, when you find yourself in this place, the best thing to do is to laugh at it. The best thing to do is to say, oh my gosh, look at how harsh I'm being on myself. I'm doing the thing that has always been there, whatever it is, but to see it with some levity and some lighthearted love, right? Because in that moment, once we recognize that we're in that thought space and in that emotional space and in that, that tension body space, as soon as we notice we're there, we're now here. We're observing it. We're not tangled up in it anymore. And once we've stepped back from it, once we're observing it, we can roll our eyes and we can say, oh my gosh, look at how silly I'm being. I don't need a tub of ice cream. I'm going to get some grapes that are also expensive, but they're yummy, and I'm not going to feel terrible about myself. I'm not hurting myself, by maladaptively eating junk food. That's not to say that you can never eat ice cream. If you like ice cream, get some ice cream. but it's about, what's the motivation of that ice cream, right? Again, is it coming from a place of love, or is it coming from a place of, pouring some salve on the wound, if you will, and feeling sorry for ourselves, right? All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Again, it was very impromptu. I don't know. It feels, I like the energy, but it feels like it's okay. I think I bounced all over the place a little bit, but anyway, I hope something here helped you. I hope you found some benefit in some of what I've said today. And I wish you well, and I'll be back again soon. All right, everybody. Take care.